I've been getting this question so many times in my comments based on this painting that I'm working on right now, and everyone's been asking, why did you paint the background blue? It's such a loaded question. There's just really not one set in stone answer. There's a lot more thought process behind it, and there's a lot of reasons in general why any artist would paint the backgrounds of their canvas a certain color before they actually start the actual painting. So a while back, when I was first getting back into oil painting, I decided to do this practice piece, right? So I love how it turned out. It's one of my favorites. When I did this, I actually did do the backdrop on it in a blue color. It wasn't as vibrant as what I have right now in my painting, but it was more just like a turquoisey color. And I used acrylic paint, watered down acrylic paint to do the backdrop. On my actual oil painting, I used just my oil paints thinned down with some Gamsol. So because I love how it turned out, I decided let me try to do the same thing, but on a larger scale, because I really just enjoyed painting over that blue. I liked how my warmer colors just canceled out all that coolness, and it felt really satisfying. I mean, I don't know if it really affected the final outcome of the painting, but I do know that I enjoyed the process. And I always say, because I truly believe that the painting process is just as important as the final outcome of your work. So you gotta do what you gotta do to enjoy that process. But then I posted a video painting the backdrop of this painting blue, and the same question popped up in that video as well. Why did you paint the backdrop on this painting blue? So the only explanation I really have for this is before I actually got started on this physical painting, and I usually, before I start painting anyways, I always am planning everything in my head constantly. Like I'll be brushing my teeth, I'm planning the painting. I'll be getting dressed, making coffee, cooking dinner. In my mind, I'm like planning the paintings. And every single time that I envisioned starting this painting, I just pictured it on a blue backdrop. I don't know what really influenced that. I kind of just felt like the picture in general, I don't know. For some reason, I just pictured it with this blue backdrop, and I just had to do it. Sometimes you just gotta go with your guts. I did see, I was scrolling on social media, I do see some people using hot pinks and brighter colors like that as backdrops. And I mean, I thought it would be interesting to also just use a colorful backdrop. And I don't know, it's just how I pictured it. I knew before I even got started that I was going to do the backdrop in blue. Now, I do know that somebody else commented and said something along the lines of, well, aren't you supposed to use brown as the backdrop? And yes, I cannot disagree with that. Using a neutral color as a backdrop is a very traditional method, and some people will do it for many different reasons. One of those reasons being, firstly, when you tint your canvas, it's so much easier to color match to your palette when you're painting over a color versus on pure white. Whenever you paint on pure white, your colors right off the bat, they're gonna visually look darker to you. Unless you get accustomed to that and you just already know that that's what's happening, you're gonna end up being tempted to lighten your color palette. Because I know this has happened to me a lot in the past. I would paint on pure white and everything will be all good until all that white is filled in. Suddenly the painting looks off, the values, the darks don't look dark enough, and the lighter colors look too light. So painting on a neutral tinted surface really helps you to get the correct values initially instead of after the fact, after you have the whole thing painted and then you realize now you gotta go back because things are not right. So that's one reason. And some popular colors that are used are, I'd say probably raw sienna or burnt sienna. Raw umber is a good one. Transparent red oxide. Vermilion is bright and really beautiful, but I have used that before actually for one of my paintings, and I did like that as well. If I personally had to choose, I think there's a transparent brown oxide that I've been wanting to try, and also burnt sienna. I like burnt sienna for that kind of thing. So yes, while using the neutral colors, browns, is very traditional, it doesn't mean that it's a hard, fast rule that you're supposed to always follow. I kind of feel like there's nothing in art that you're supposed to do. There are proven techniques and art processes that work and are great, and they're there for a reason and used by many artists for a reason because they're tried and true and used probably all the way back to the old masters. But as an artist, I think it's fun to just explore and experiment and see for yourself the difference between using a neutral color backdrop versus using a bright color, and find out for yourself if you like it, if you don't like it, if it's for you or not. And you can see the pros and cons. Then you will realize why certain artists may do it and why certain artists don't. I can tell you right now that painting on this blue backdrop Firstly, it's really bright. I made it really bright. It's hard to tell in the videos, but sometimes I feel like it's blinding my eyes. And honestly, I can't wait to just cover up all of that blue now because I'm kind of getting tired of it. But I will say this right now, that painting over this bright blue does affect the way that the colors are appearing when I paint them down. So what I mean by that is they look a certain way when I mix the colors on my palette, and I'm painting on a glass gray palette. But then once I put my stroke up against this turquoisey bright blue, the hue shifts a little bit. And it's all really color theory because the surrounding color is going to affect the way the main color looks. But I'm not going in and manipulating it based on what I see there. I'm following the colors that I choose on my palette. So I'm staying consistent in that sense. I'm not going to mix one color here and then start changing it to look a certain way, because I know that once I do cover up all of this turquoise and knock out all of that bright blue backdrop, that it's going to come together. So this is a great example of trusting the process. I already know for sure that the next painting that I do, especially if it's going to be on a large scale, I'm going to use a neutral backdrop, because I think I've just been working on this painting so long, I'm just tired of looking at this blue. I cannot do it again. I just want something neutral and easy to look at. And if you're gonna do a bright color for your backgrounds, keep that in mind too. If you're a slow painter like I am, you're gonna spend a lot of time looking at that color, then think carefully of what color you're gonna choose. And then another reason why artists will pick whatever color they pick for their backdrop, it's done with intent. It wasn't just on a whim like how I did, how I just envisioned it. Some artists, when they paint, they'll put a certain color in the backdrop. And then when they paint very loosely, and you can see when you look, sometimes not even just looking up close, when you just look at the painting, the finished painting, little bits and pieces of that bright backdrop are shining through. And it looks really beautiful, especially with the planned color combinations and the whole color palette. So it's really done with intent and done purposefully, so that way it's part of the final painting. And it doesn't have to be done with a bright color either. I've seen some neutral tones, like let's say a burnt sienna done all for the backdrop, and then painting a sky. And then when you start going into the clouds, like just leaving little hints and bits of that burnt sienna shining through, you can get some really cool effects with it. Honestly, you don't really know what effects you're gonna get until you're actually painting and you lay it down and it just looks good. It just looks good to you and you just want to go with it. That's like part of the beauty of painting, is you see things as you go along. I've also seen portraits and skin tones painted in a way where some of that neutral color or even bright colors are still shining through in certain areas, like around the eyelash line or the hairline, and you get some really, really cool effects. Have you guys ever had any issues when you're painting over pure white, and when you look at the painting, there's like tiny little white speckles? This happens mostly, I think, on canvas. Little speckles of white that just didn't get covered by the paints. If you were to have done an underpainting under that, just a nice wash, because when you thin down that color, it's gonna really get into all those little pores and crevices in the canvas. That right there is gonna help eliminate that problem from the get-go of having the tiny little specks show through. And then for this particular painting, I decided to take a step further, and instead of just washing my canvas, just doing one solid color, I decided to just use the same color, but layer it up and add in some darker tones, shading a little bit. And I used turpentine when I started to do the layering. So pretty much with my oil paint thinned down to like a very watery consistency. So I pretty much treated it like if it was watercolor, just layering over it to create some darker tones and to shade it a bit. And I wasn't planning to do it initially, but I really did enjoy it. And it just, you know, it really helped me to visually see my composition before I got in there with the color, and help me while I'm painting to see the placement of where my darks go versus my lighter colors. So I really hope that helps you guys understand why I painted this background blue in particular. You do not have to stick to one set color. I'd say it like this: if you're new to oil painting and you do want to try doing a wash and you never did it before because you only really painted on white, I suggest for your first time trying neutral. And then maybe on just a small practice piece, try a brighter color and see what you think. You know, you never know until you try. That's the fun part about painting, is the experiment part, and it's just trying new things and seeing what works for you and what doesn't. So I hope that shed some light on why this whole thing is painted blue. Will I be doing it again next time? No. Will I ever do it again in the future? Maybe. Who knows? But I have to get this blue out of my system. If you guys also use different colors as your backdrop and you have your own specific reasons as to why you use the colors that you use, please feel free to let us know in the comments. I personally love hearing suggestions and I love hearing everybody else's work process. So feel free to comment. It'll help anybody else out too who's trying to figure it out. And in the meantime, I'm gonna get back to my painting.